So welcome back once again. Today we've got the old split screen in for a little bit of work on the wipers and the wiper motor. We came back from a trip yesterday, raining quite badly, wipers on as much as they could to shift the water. They were doing a fairly decent job, but then we started getting this horrible noise. I thought at first it was the actual wipers that were making the noise on the glass. It turns out it's not. I've taken the wipers off. I'm now just left with a spindle sticking out. We've turned it on and we're getting a noise. So let's show you what the noise is first. So that's a little bit too noisy, as you can hear. So we're going to have to have a look at the motor. Turn that off. There we go. So as you just heard, the noise is quite bad. I'm not sure what it is yet. I did a spindle replacement a few years back. It may be that. I'm not sure at the moment, but it does sound quite bad. Imagine listening to this as you travel up the motorway for hours on end, you know, wipers going as much as they can, and that noise, it's just been unbearable. So I decided today that we'd have a look at what we've got to do to get that wiper motor off and have a look at what's up with it. So first thing we're going to be doing is taking off the parcel shelf. So with these off at the end, like I said, we've got one at either end securing it, and I've just realised we've got one in the middle. So that's one off, as you can see, it's quite loose. Got one in the middle and then one at the other end. So I've got a couple of bolts underneath. So these are the support bolts for the steering column. These bolt on underneath the shelf. So that loosens off that. So we've got a bit of movement between the steering column here. So to make things a little bit easier on myself, I've decided to take the two bolts out that fasten the support onto the steering, which will allow that to drop, and as you can see, it's dropped down quite nicely. I'm going to take that one out and then we'll move the actual shelf. So with the bolt moved, we should be able to manoeuvre this out and down to a point where it's going to come out. So we can either use that as it is at the moment, or we can disconnect the speedo and take it out of there and remove it completely. So now we've taken off the speedo cable, we can now bring this across and gives us a lot better access. Now one thing I did do with the tray is the hole that is normally situated here for the speedo cable, I've just enlarged it because obviously if you're going to be putting the speedo cable upwards, it's going to come through this. At least with a bigger hole, you've got the options of either undoing it and feeding the knob round here for the back of the speedo, in which you need a big hole, or you can undo it off the wheel, drag it all out. It's a lot easier with a little cut on that to make it sure they can get the speedo cable out without any problems. So we've now got a bit of light on the job, and what we're looking at is here we have got a screw that holds the motor in place. It could be a nut, but on ours it's a screw. I might have done this to make it slightly easier. I think that's the one that locates the motor onto the body. There we go, that one's up. Just excuse the wiring, it is a little bit messy. We are in the process of changing the radio. I've just got all this plugged in at the moment. So we've now got that bit off. you can see there now we've got free movement on the actual mortar. The only thing that's holding it on now is the spindle. So this is the spindles. I have already tried to grease up the spindles themselves, but the outers, I'm not sure the mortar noise or the noise from the wipers is coming from this area or the mortar. I have oiled them up in the intention to try and get it so that these wouldn't make any noise, but obviously you can still hear the noise. So all we're going to do is we're going to take off the nuts that's holding these in position. Depending on what type of clips you've got on here, you may or may not be able to get the nuts off. So it depends on what circlip size you've got here. There we go. The circlip size that's there is smaller than the diameter of the nut and the washer. We've then got the rubber seal, but if we push this now, that will go into the van. So we've still got the other one to take off on the other side. I'll bring you back when we've done that one. So we've now taken off the nuts and the rubber seal. As you can see now, that does move in and out quite easily. I think everything is now balancing on the internals. So we'll take a look inside at what's required to take them off. So we should now be able to manoeuvre the mortar out past the wiring and everything else. Our brake seems to be in the way. And there we go. So that's his mortar out in one piece. Now one thing to note is there is an adjuster screw here. I think that's for the tension, but the noise that we're getting is coming from the mortar itself. So it may be that this area is going to be dry with grease, or it may be we've got some a dry bearing at the back. But for whatever reason, we're going to take this to pieces and have a look what's inside and have a look at what the cause of the problem is. So taking a look at this, we've already got grease down the shafts, so we're trying to eliminate where the noise would come from. I've done that one as well. As you can see, quite a bit of grease left on that one. What I think we'll do is we'll take a photo of position so we know that that's where it's going to be when it stops, because we're going to be taking it off there. And what we're going to do, we're going to try to take the nut off underneath, and what we're going to do is then disconnect all the mechanism and try the motor again. I still believe it's the motor, but it could be simply joints here. So we're taking off this middle one. We know that when we put it back on, it needs to be there, as we've made a little arrow down there. So what we're going to do now is just take off the 3 bolts that hold the motor in place. So that now comes apart. Now one thing to note is this unit needs earthing onto the chassis, and what we normally have is a little copper section there. You can see there it's worn away for some reason, it's cracked, and possibly that's a bad earth, causing a bad earth, but we'll have a look at that as we go along. So we need a little bit of copper to replace that, so that the rubber mounting that's in there will allow the earth to connect between this, the bolt, and then the chassis. Just a thing to note, that's all. So that now can be taken off. I'll lay that to one side. So in here we've got 2 screws at either side, which will allow the armature cover to come off. But before we do that, what I'd like to do is have a look inside here to find out whether or not we've got some grease in there. We should have full of grease, but I think that's the adjuster for the free play on the gears. And also, just spotted it, is that down here we've got an adjuster here. That might be for the free play for the motor as it moves backwards and forwards. So we'll take this cover off. And yep, we've got lots of grease in there. We've got grease on these areas as well. But these are all your contacts for making contact onto that wheel to position it for the auto park and for the run. So all that looks fairly decent. Got quite a bit of what feels like a good lot of grease on the shaft itself. Now that itself looks a little bit dry, so I think we'll bomb a bit of grease on that. So far the only thing we are doing is we're putting grease on this shaft. Now if we find that when we put the motor back together and it works and there isn't any noise, then we know that it's possibly going to be that shaft that's got dry. So that needs to go back in the same position. So we'll put that back in there, and then we'll put that cover back on the top, and then we'll screw it all up, and we'll see if there's any difference when we connect it up. So now we've made sure that there's some grease in that drive. We've greased the shaft. So basically what we'll do is we'll take this out to the van, plug it into the electrics, and see if the noise has disappeared. If it hasn't, then obviously we need to make further adjustments. So we've got two places that we can make adjustments on this motor. That's the end on there and on that bit there. So that will be my next port of call, if you like, in case it's still there. So we'll see what it does first. So I've now connected up the electrical connections. Made no adjustments other than on that one where I've put some grease down the shaft, and we'll see how it goes. So we just put it onto the gear stick as a temporary earth. And as you can hear, we've still got the noise. So I'm feeling round here we've got quite a lot of vibration. So what I'm going to be doing is taking off the end ones and seeing what's happened at the end. Now we should have some grease down that shaft, and we should also have some grease on the end. Now the other thing that we could do is we could try slackening off the screw at the end first. So I've got my trusty screwdriver, just going to go in there, and I'm going to do half a turn, and once again we'll give it another try. So we've still got that noise. So we've got his motor back in the garage. Now what we're going to expect with it being a motor, you're going to have brushes, bearings and the armature. So these things may fall out as we are taking it apart. So we're going to be careful trying to take this apart, so that we're going to try and keep the outer casing off, the armature inside. And it's not done it. We're hoping it we're going to do it, but it hasn't. So we've got 3 sets of brushes in there. And that's the drive for the motor. There's some grease on that already. That's a little bit dry there, so we may clean that up and then reapply some grease. The top again is just a little bit dry, so that drives down into there. You can see some grease at the bottom. Ooh. So we've got quite a magnetic pull on that section. So what I'll do is I'll drop a bit of grease in the bottom. There we go. Can't see any other damage around on that magnetic system there. That looks fairly decent inside. Brushes are long enough to do the job, but I'm now beginning to suspect either on that end or that end we've got a bit of dryness. So we'll clean them up first and I'll bring you back then. So have I come up with a solution? Maybe. So as you can see, what I've done there is I put a tie wrap around the brush and the spring. That'll keep it in place. So that looked like a simple fix. We've got that in position now, and that goes in easily. So no noise, no vibration, anything at the moment. So everything seems to be working. I think what we'll do is just free off these. And again, no noise or vibration on that. Now the hard bit is getting this back on here without pulling the motor out, because this is fairly strong on the motor. So the big magnets in here are going to be trying to pull this out. So I'm going to try his best to get this back on here without it pulling that off. There we go. So we should be able to just put that back in there. That one back in there. So that little tip with the small tie wraps, I'll remember that for next time. So we're back to where we were. All we've done is lubricated everything inside. So we've got a couple of adjustments we can make, that one there and there. So we want to try it again and see what the result is. So we'll go wire that back up and see what happens. We'll give it a try and see what the result is. And straight away we've got very little in the way of noise. It's just the usual motor noise. On the second setting I can hear it's going around a little bit quicker because you've got 2-speed wipers on this. I do hope at some point someone will bring out an intermittent wipe for these, so we could have that first speed as the intermittent and the second speed as on. Been thinking about that one myself. So that looks to have cured that. So we'll take it back in the garage and rebuild it, and then we'll bring it back in here later and we'll see if we can reinstall it. So it looks like everything's going to plan. We've still got the repair on that copper mount and a few other little things to tidy up under the dash. We've taken out the radio to gain better access to the wiring so that it will hopefully go back in a little bit easier than it came out. So follow us along for part 2 on the wiper build and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.